Good evening. Welcome to the school committee meeting of Monday, March 22nd, 2021. The hour being 6 o'clock. I'll read into the record. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, MGL Chapter 38, subsection 16, and the governor's order concerning imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, meetings in the town of Oxford will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. We will strive to provide access to such meetings via a link or number to call in or other similar option. In the event we are unable to accommodate same, despite best efforts, we will post recorded sessions of the meeting as soon as possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings. For individuals who wish to participate remotely, please dial 1-646-558-8656 and enter PIN 896-9025-3895, or join the meeting on the posted link on the website, entering the passcode 760016. Tonight on our agenda, we do have two public hearings regarding school choice and the school department operational budget for FY22. We will also hear from our Superintendent Search Advisory Committee, and other business will include the phased return for in-person learning and other features of this meeting tonight. Our first order of business will be hear from our student representative, Ms. Ashley McGowan. Ashley, you're present this evening.
Hello, yes.
Hello.
So at the high school, we have our March Madness voting brackets, which are going really well. We finished with our favorite cereal bracket last week, and Cinnamon Toast Crunch won. And we're having our finals for the Disney Pixar movie on Friday, and then we'll move on to our final bracket, which is the favorite candy bracket. And then finally, we just want to congratulate volleyball and football for returning to the court and the field after a really long break, and it's nice for them to finally be getting back and having their season. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. I'll read into the record. We're entering a notice of public hearing. Oxford Public Schools school choice for 2021 and 2022, and school committee budget for school year 2021-2022. The Oxford School Committee will hold a public hearing on Monday, March 22nd, 2021, on a topic of school choice for the school year 2021-2022, according to Chapter 76, Section 12B of the Massachusetts General Laws, and also on the topic of the school department budget for the school year 2021-2022, consistent with the provisions of Chapter 71, Section 38N of the Mass General Laws. All interested persons shall be given an opportunity to be heard remotely per the public hearing notice duly posted with the office of the town clerk. A copy of the proposed FY22 budget can be viewed on the Oxford Public Schools website, oxps.org. The public hearing will be followed by a regular school committee meeting. Notice of the public hearing is also posted on the Massachusetts Newspaper Publishers Association, MNPA's website at masspublicnotices.org. Respectfully, Daniel P. Coonan, Chairman, Oxford School Committee. With that, entertain a motion. I don't need a motion. I'll open the public hearing. The first item of business will be school choice. There is a memorandum in our packet, and Dr. Nash, you have the floor to briefly explain, please.
Thank you. We're recommending this evening that the school committee vote not to approve school choice in any grades for the 21-22 school year. As you know, I've provided you in a brief memo with a rationale. I would ask that the school committee vote to not elect to participate due to enrollment.
Thank you for the recommendation from Dr. Nash. Board members, comments, questions? Mr. Cagnelli.
I would, seeing we have, and Dr. Nash can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we have till June 1st.
You do.
So I would ask that we maybe table this, seeing we are in the middle of a search for a new superintendent, and maybe kind of get an idea where that potential candidate might be in this, but I would ask that we push this to a further date.
Push to June 1st, being that we're in the process of the
Push it to a further date before June 1st.
before June 1st. Okay.
And I don't know if I have to make a motion or just a recommendation, or
put a motion, if there's a motion on the floor, we can then have discussion on the motion.
So I'd like to make a motion to table this vote until a future date, but prior to June 1st.
Motion on the floor, do I have a second?
Is the school choice still?
Correct.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Moved in second, discussion? Mrs. Griffin?
I know I'm ready this evening to vote and take Dr. Nash's recommendation to not entertain school choice. I think it's in our best interest to keep our schools the way they are at the present moment, and enrollment looks like, we're on the right track for the fall, and our kids have significant needs that we need to attend to. And I'd like to focus on the students of the Oxford Public Schools as opposed to opening up many seats and whatnot. So I think we have some clear guidance from our superintendent presently that I'd like to entertain this evening. But I do understand that you two gentlemen have different thoughts. I'd love to know why, like what is the thought behind postponing this decision this evening?
Through the chair, should like to respond, Mr. Crackell.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Well, because, again, we have till June 1st. It's March 22nd. I certainly respect Dr. Nash's opinion. I certainly, as one member, have a different opinion and would like to hear from the next educational leader of our district. I know it did come up. It wasn't a question, but it came up. Multiple candidates talked about it to some level, so I would certainly love to hear more from potential candidates that we're going to talk about later. And I do think I'm very, very concerned with our drastically declining enrollment. And I'm not sure we can wait another year not to try to get some more income. I know Dr. Nash has pointed out that it's not equal. Kids that we lose is not equaling out, but it's better than zero. And we continue to lose each and every year. And those numbers of a few meetings ago really startled me. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't think we need to rush to it. I'm not saying down the line I might support what her recommendation is. I just don't know why we need to act tonight when we still have time.
Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Yeah. So just to be clear, pal, my second was so that we could discuss it.
Okay.
I actually really appreciate the presentation that Dr. Nash put together, and certainly leaning that way myself. I think the gaps are going to be such that if we can have small classes and catch these kids up, and we can get back on the school choice track later. But I also agree with Mr. Carnecchioli that if we have the time and there's no advantage to us making this decision now, unless I'm missing something that there is, then I would like to hear what our future candidates have to say about the subject.
Mrs. Forbes, and then I'll circle back to you, Mr. Griffin.
I just had a couple questions. I share a lot of the same sentiments as both Mr. Burke and Mrs. Griffin. My question is, currently, are we still only accepting students at the OHS as school choice for ROTC?
No.
We are
I
open
don't
to
believe
all,
you're accepting any students.
Not accepting it.
not accepting any.
I
So
think
we-
that was something that was found out. You can't,
Right,
you
there was,
vote
oh,
school
right,
choice
couldn't
based on a
choose.
grade and
Right,
not
right.
a program.
Okay, so my second question is, has the amount that the city or town that these students come from changed since last I knew?
Well, it's a floating amount. It's based on the student and their needs. It's not a flat $5,000 that you get.
Okay.
You can, depending on the students, the range, if a student is a special needs student, the range can go as high as 15,000. But that obviously doesn't cover the cost. If you
Right.
look at the per pupil expenditure of what you would spend without, for any student, it's certainly not going to be covered by school choice.
Right.
One thing that I would point out, or two things if I might. One, we are not dependent on school choice monies to balance our budget. So that's something that I think is important, unlike some other districts. And two, I don't want you to misunderstand that it's not my recommendation, it's the recommendation that comes from the administrative team. So I just, as I pointed out.
And how many students do we currently have that are school?
52 students. How
That
many
are
are school
school choice,
choice?
if you have
It's
that.
in your packet, in the presentation, I believe.
Oh, here they are, 21. I got it, thank you.
Okay,
21, correct?
Yes,
And they're cycling out as well.
right.
right.
We haven't offered I believe we haven't offered school choice in 4 to 5 years.
No, we offered it last year under, a former superintendent.
Right.
and
Last
directed-
year, however, those students are no longer with us, I think.
No, I think they continue.
Right,
They were grandfathered in. Once you're accepted, correct me if I'm wrong,
right.
you are a student of Oxford Public Schools until you decide to leave. We own them, essentially.
No, you're absolutely correct, because they left the ROTC program, which they came in under.
Even if they leave the ROTC.
I know, but they're no longer involved in that program,
Yeah, but they're still our
but they're
students.
still our students. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for
I
that.
I think you had 8 and 21 that
Yeah.
existed when you might have had school choice and voted that to be, voted positively a few years prior to that.
Okay.
Okay,
Mrs. Griffin, you.
So just to go back on Dr. Nash's point and to kind of reiterate. So I did hear Mr. Canacchioli's concern about enrollment, and I think enrollment, the way it's been, we know it's because a lot of parents chose this year to opt to have homeschool their children. And I think we're gonna see trends again for that to change in the fall. And parents will be having their kids re-enroll. That's to my understanding, that's the ongoing trend. We're already kind of seeing these changes in different school districts where parents are already having their kids come back potentially because of the change in models. So I think our enrollment is definitely going to go up. Did we see a dip? Yeah. Did everybody see a dip across the Commonwealth? Absolutely. But I don't think that should push us into a decision that we take lightly because, as we know, it's a small amount of money we receive, and to educate each pupil, it costs significantly more than that small amount of money. And if we end up relying on school choice money to balance our budget, and we could end up in a situation like other communities that surround us where they're not able to balance their budget significantly well without accepting school choice students. It's a difficult thing to, have students come into a district at any time that you don't really know who the student is. And that's one thing as an educator that I've personally always reflected upon. We want students, but our first priority, my first priority as a school committee member here in Oxford, is always to the constituents I represent, which are Oxford, Oxford community members. And I think we are blessed at this present moment, for once, to have the class sizes that we have that are almost in line with our policy that the school committee has about class size numbers. For years, we've had numbers that have been exceptionally high. And now we're almost in the ballpark of having numbers that meet what we think are acceptable numbers. And I would like to just keep it that way, especially considering the recommendations from our administrative team and the significant needs that we know that lie in front of a lot of our students for social emotional health, for educational gaps. My personal hope would be that the attention would be given to Oxford Public Schools first as a priority. And then we look towards the future when we're a little bit more stable, if it makes sense to have school choice after the fact. But this just does not seem like the right year to me. That's all.
Yeah, just a couple points. The enrollment data I'm talking about, Pal, just isn't about this year. We had a presentation, and you can see projected out, it's a drastic decline. So it's not just about this year, because I obviously understand that everyone's kind of in that boat. We also control the number of seats that we open up. I mean, that's something that we, as a district, control. So it's not like we just open up the floodgates. And I guess the third point of just clarification, Dr. Nash, this data that you've given us, school choice and homeschooled students, the school choice column, those students are students that we currently have in our district under school choice, or are these kids that have gone school choice to other districts?
No, those are our students that we've taken in.
So these are students
you might
we've
have-
taken.
I don't know what grade they're in, but you
Right.
took them in when you voted school
Right,
choice.
so what I would like to see before we make any decision is the number of kids that we've lost to other districts for school choice. Because that's really the number I'm talking about, and are we able to balance that? And again, I'm not saying that we by any means am I saying school choice is gonna balance our budget. We're losing dollars each and every year, we're losing enrollment. And I just wanted to see what those numbers, what that, again, if you lose 40 kids to school choice, and we're getting $0 for those kids. But if we entertain school choice and maybe we take 15 and now we're really offsetting some of that. That's what's gonna worry me down the line is, yeah, this year we have this ESER 2 money that we'll be able to use for the next year or two to help remediate, so we have some good money to do that, but then after that, where are we gonna be? That's my worry. And again, I'm not saying that this is the time that I might say, vote no. I might, but I just don't know, I just don't wanna make the decision today and then lock our hands when maybe in May, we decide we wanna try it, or we wanna look at it again. So I just didn't think we needed to vote on it tonight, and that's kinda where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Crackle. As this board knows or doesn't know, anyone that follows, I've always been a proponent of school choice. I believe we have a quality brand and product here at Oxford. And the downside, if not taking school choice, is the numbers game. Is when you start losing numbers. When you start losing numbers, and it just magnitudes out every single year, is eventually losing numbers is losing jobs. So then then it comes, okay, we have to cut a teacher or cut a program, and now we're not servicing our students the best that we can. I'm not saying to supplement the budget with it. However, we have to be able to balance the ebb and flow of our population within school choice. I think it's very germane to this conversation, which our administrators were very quick to say no. And I can see that because you don't know what's coming through the door. However, what the piece of information I am requesting is if we were to accept school choice, what is the number, as Mr. Canacchio alluded to, the number of available seats per grade? Once we have that number, I think we can have a better rational conversation of the impact is on the class, on those incoming class sizes. And I too would like to hear, and I would, whoever's listening, if it's by June 1st, I'm not sure if I'll be in the seat or not at that stage, well, when the discussion comes up, but to hear the candidates for superintendent on, because it is a big issue in Massachusetts, on their take on school choice, and would they believe it was good for this year, for Oxford. So I'm in agreement with the motion to hold this to honor before June 1st with more information to be requested.
So I can speak to the principals. They would tell you that they do not want to increase class size next year. That would be, no matter what their numbers are, their numbers have not changed dramatically since we presented to you in December and you had the projections based on positions they were requesting. So that's the first thing. Second, I think we can certainly give you the number of students that choice out. We have that, Nick has that, and we can show you that. There's no question that across the state of Massachusetts, every school district is seeing projections that are going to show decreasing. And that could have, obviously, an impact in any district, from as severe as closing a school, for example, down the line in 10 or 12 years, if you did not have enrollment. So I certainly don't think you don't want to look at it very seriously every year to see whether or not there are spaces that you might have available. That is why a lot of schools do wait till about May. Most school districts that I've been in tend to look at that in May. Not that you have all the numbers, there are still people coming and going, and we see numbers, for example, dramatically increase oftentimes in kindergarten in the summer. So typically, of course, we don't vote school choice at kindergarten level. And there seems to be the general consensus to vote them more at the secondary levels. So certainly we can postpone it. It's not an issue. You have until June. In fact, we have to submit to June, but by law, the law actually requires a district to revisit. And in the original law, you have to notify and assess your numbers again in July. But you have to actually submit to the state by June 1st.
All right. Thank you. And also the report of available seats per grade.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Further discussion? Being none, call for the vote. Roll call vote. Mr. Canacchioli?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. 5 in the affirmative to continue the public hearing to a date. This public hearing on school choice to a date to be determined before June 1st. So it's been opened and it is continued. Okay. Second item in our public hearing this evening is the FY 21, oh, I'm sorry. I did not open the floor for public, this is a public hearing on school choice. And I'm gonna have to let me think. I'm gonna have to rescind that vote. I'll have to call for a second vote, because I do not have it. Is anyone from the public here anyone from the public care to speak on public choice? And I did have, it's an order, and I was out of order. So it was a point of order on my part. Anyone care to speak on school choice? Okay, I'll hold the vote again. Mr. Cannacchioli?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well, 5 in the affirmative, to continue the public hearing. Second half of the public hearing is on the FY budget. Dr. Nash, do you have a brief presentation for
I
us?
do. And we're gonna pull it up right now. And get rid of Dr. Henderson's face.
With all due respect.
With all due respect, thank you for saying, with all due respect. And I hope you can see this, and I know you have your hard copies, because I'm gonna have to read off of mine, because I think the print is gonna look a little bit too fine. So Nick, you can bring it along, and that is the presentation overview. The committee has a hard copy of that, so I don't think I need to go through all the components. This is really more for FinCom. And certainly, next slide, please. Nothing has changed, obviously, in the mission and vision statement that were approved in 2019. Those are included because it really drives every decision that you make in a school district. I will not read these to you. They're available. And I think it's important, however, to recognize that both of these are what drives really the development of any budget in the school district. You would move 2 slides ahead to the 5 major areas of focus. Thank you. In part of your strategic objectives, the focus of this school district is really in 5 areas: curriculum, instruction, and assessment, parent and community engagement, professional culture, management and operations, and social, emotional, and physical well-being of students and staff. None of these really, they're all underpinnings of what we do in the district, certainly more so, I think, some of them more so this year, particularly with COVID, but they continue to be areas of focus. Next slide, please. I don't have to, again, this is hard to see from a distance, and so I think I'll go back and make it bold for the next meeting. But I don't have to go over with the committee the budget timeline. As you know, you are all been part of it. It begins early in October. It really begins when the school committee gives us the directive as to the types of budgets that you would like us to build. As you will recall, seeing that it's a long time ago, you directed us to build a level services budget and also to identify additional needs, or what we call an educationally sound budget, which we have done. And so your budget, of course, tonight is one step in the process where you certify the budget in a public hearing. And then, of course, the end comes when the town votes the budget at the town meeting. And that, and only then, is when we know that we have confirmed that the figure that we have presented and or that the town has presented, we can then move forward. Next page, please. Overview of district staff. Again, I'll point out a couple of things to you. I wanted to break it up so that you could see, particularly for members who might be newer, but just to refresh your memory, that we have done some reorganization in central office. We're actually down 1 position due to the retirement. Mrs. O'Coin, if you remember, we did not fill that position. We redirected and reorganized that position early in the year. We also have not filled a district-wide school psychologist. Those 2 combined have allowed us to reorganize and move forward with the curriculum director position. But you can see the staffing on a district level. Next slide. There's an error on this page in your hard copy, but not in this copy. I just want to point this out. Technology department, as you know, the school committee voted during the course of this year to add a technology assistant, and you also endorsed that as we were able to work that into our FY22 budget. So what used to be 1.5 FTE for our technology support staff moving forward will be 2.5. It's 2.5 right now. We'll continue with that next year. The error is in your hard copy under custodians. That should not read 10 FTE because it is not 10 full-time equivalent. It is 10 staff members. And if you recall, we hired this year as part of our plan, health and safety plan, 4 part-time custodians. We were able to continue those, again, through reorganization and some budget changes for next year. Those are in your budget. And so we will have 10 staff, not the equivalent of 10.0 FTE. They're not all full-time positions, but 10 custodians. Our nurses stay the same at 4.0, and our food service department stays the same with a potential exception. We are looking at redefining the clerical position in the food service department. That position currently, while it was originated as a part-time 4 to 5 hour a day, 20-hour a week position back 10 years ago, it somehow evolved into a full-time position. But in meeting with the food service director and meeting with one of our union stewards, both of them acknowledge that this position is primarily a cafeteria manager for the high school, a job description we do not have, and the 75% of that position is primarily dedicated to that. So we're working through some details with the union, the SEIU, to see if we can resolve this issue and put it as a position that it probably should be. Would be coming back to you at a later date if we're able to do that. So right now, I just want to give you a heads up on that. All right. Next, please. Our staffing by buildings. A couple of errors in your hard copies. Anywhere that you see, not in the PowerPoint, but anywhere that you do see FTE for custodial, that actually should be removed. It's 3.5 bodies, if you will. And it's 2.0 nurses, not nurse, because you can't have 2 of a singleton, at our Barton School. One of those assigned full-time as an LPN to a single special needs student. So not much shift there, obviously anticipating that there would be some changes. This is as a result of current staffing. Many of those positions, or a few of those positions, are positions that are remote teachers that are on 1-year contracts. Here's the additional COVID-19 positions that we were able to add this year. There's been some fluctuation in these. 3 elementary remote learning teachers, a long-term substitute, 4 K-12 academic assistants. What has remained extremely constant is our health and safety monitors. And then we initially started the year with 10 bus monitors, and that is down to 2. And as you recognize, the committee, these were all part of our ESSER 1 and CARES money, continue to be paid, will be paid through the rest of the school year out of those funds. Those positions are 1-year positions. The next slide, please. This gives you a history of student enrollment, and I think it's something that the committee needs to consider. Looking back in the 18-19 school year and looking at the changes, and I think this is what Mr. C was referring to in talking about school choice. However, I would point this out to you, and I think it's important to recognize that the number that you see typically, as I've looked at the history over a few years, ranges somewhere between 43 to 50 plus students that you lose on any given year. Many of those you don't lose until the end of 8th grade when they start to make decisions to go to other schools that traditionally begin in 9th grade. However, this year we lost 122 students, but I would note this for the public. That reduction, we believe, was impacted by 2 major areas. One, the huge increase in homeschool students that you'll see from 18 to 52 or so, and the extremely small kindergarten class that we had this year. So if you add those 2 together, it's about 68 students. If you took that out of the mix, you would be looking at where we would typically tend to be, around 54 students. So again, I think as Mrs. Griffin pointed out, this year is an anomaly for most school districts, recognizing that more parents homeschooled, there were more alternatives, and but it is obviously a trend. There's no question about it. School districts across the state are seeing it. NESDEC's projections look very similar for a lot of school districts. I can tell you in the district that I was last in before here, they were losing about 100 students per year. So it is what it is. It is a trend. I wanted to show you what our school choice and homeschool numbers look like. Again, you can see the dramatic increase over FY20 in homeschooling. When I spoke with Helen, who typically takes them in, if you will, and hands me the applications, which I review, in a good year, you usually are looking at somewhere around low to mid-20s. So you can see where that has dramatically increased. We expect that those 30 plus students are probably going to come back into our school district next year. Many of them, if I recall back to August and September, many of them were in the elementary grades. However, there were some at middle school, fewer at the high school. And then your school choice students, which you had asked about, these would be students that at the time, again, while it's reflected currently this way, I would only assume that these students would be students that you potentially, when you voted school choice during that year, they came in at that time. We would have to go back to look to see at what grades they're at when they exit out and what the impact would be of that, the net impact of that. Next. Again, this is an extremely unusual year, and I wanted to show you a slide that reflects the number of students that we have who are in full remote learning mode. And so this slide does that. About 410 students reflects about 28% of the population. You remember that we were somewhere in the mid to low 20s back in August when we were beginning school, and I talked about the ability then for us to move from a virtual learning academy to actually using our staff members. That has worked out exceptionally well. Interestingly enough, all of these surveys have gone out to our parents. Tomorrow I meet with the middle school and high school administrators, but based on the elementary results, we're not seeing a lot of changes in people wanting to come back in. Don't know what you saw in other districts when you surveyed your staff. And it appears, although I do not have the deadline has not passed yet for middle school parents to return their survey, it appears that the trends are similar to what's happened at the elementary level, that students and parents are staying with whatever model they originally selected. So that may hold true, and therefore you can see that at the high school we have about 195 students who are electing that. And while the decision may be one of parents, it probably is also going to be very much one of a student telling mom or dad whether or not they're comfortable in returning, as opposed to the younger students. Next slide. You already are there. I wanted to put a slide in on building utilization. This might be something helpful, particularly for anyone on the FinCom who may be looking at what our building capacity looks like. Also, given the fact that we are potentially in the running for some type of a project at the middle school. And you can see that when I asked principals to provide me with the information, and at this point in time we have about 8 rooms that are available, the most being at the middle school, and 3 at Chafee. Those rooms, currently I know that we have moved 2 of our remote teachers from Barton at Chafee, and we're moving 1 more as we go back at her request. So, next slide, please. We know the impact that services to students has on a budget. In this case, I wanted to give you a sense of the number of students that we have in the district who are enrolled in programs this year, both in our district, out of district, and then the number of students in our inclusion setting. The total number of students who are receiving special education services in this district is 265. It represents roughly the state average, 17–18% of your student population. You can see in prior years that the numbers last year in FY20 were around 18%, but again, our total enrollment was 1574. And the year prior to that in FY19, it was 16.8, but again, our total enrollment then was 1617. So this represents out-of-district students, pretty consistent we see that we've done, I think, a good job of ensuring that we have programs that we run in school, sub-separate programs, where we need them. And we run 7 right now this year. We will be adding a program at Barton next year because our students are aging up to that. So we'll be looking at adding a program. And that number reflects really it's pretty consistent, constant number. We're not seeing great fluctuations in that number. So, next page. Wanted to, again, show you a 3-year comparison of some of the major cost factors in special education. Obviously, the number one cost factor is going to be your salaries for all of your educators who deliver any type of special education service. The next area is going to be typically your out-of-district tuition cost, and the third area is usually transportation. So I wanted to break those out. I didn't break salaries out for you, but I wanted to break out the transportation costs and the out-of-district tuitions. Again, noting the number of students fluctuates from year to year. Our special education cost categories are outlined for you. Again, 3 key cost factors are your salaries, your out-of-district tuition, and your transportation. In-district programs are included as far as staff and salaries. Transportation costs, you can see, have remained pretty consistent. This year they're down a little bit. Out-of-district tuition cost, we typically reflect about a 3% increase. Our budget, I think, reflects that. So you can see that the number of students has fluctuated, but obviously over the course of years, tuitions have continued to go up. Next slide. So what percentage of our budget, before we even look at anything else, does special education represent? Again, it's remained pretty consistent over the last 3 years. If you were to look at your total operational budget, which is represented on the line for each of the last 3 years that's underlined, and then you were to look at your SPED cost, your total cost of SPED, prior to any budget offsets, you can see that it has represented over the last 3 years approximately 36%. So those are really mandated costs for us, or any school district. That's the cost that a district must face, and this is why we talk about circuit breaker having such an important impact on a school district. If you have extraordinary costs beyond a certain amount, you can recover those. But again, without those offsets, and you can see what those offsets have been, think of where your budget would be. So again, we are anticipating some of these offsets. The one for FY22, the circuit breaker one is real because, as you know, we used last year's circuit breaker and moved that forward, so we're always working with a real figure. We're not reliant on balancing our budget on anticipated circuit breaker. We actually know what that number is like, and we had slightly underestimated circuit breaker. So we actually, when the number came in, I think we were about 56,000 or so underestimate. Was that correct, Justin?
It was close to that. For next year, we're gonna have
Yes.
704,000 to
Right.
offset.
Okay. All right. So yeah, and that number we had underestimated in your budget back in December. I think we were at the 650s or something like that. So we've actually picked
Justin,
up.
if you want to take a seat at the table, just in case there's further questions, so you are mic'd
Oh,
up.
sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next slide. So our level services budget that we presented to you since December, and as we've built it and refined it, accounts for all of our known costs as of March 2021. So actually, what you have in your packet is the most updated. It reflects any changes, any fluctuations that we've had since we met two months ago, or we gave you that packet initially. It assumes increases for all of our collective bargaining agreements. It assumes budget offsets will remain stable. Again, circuit breaker is not unstable for us because we know it's not a projection. Entitlement grants, we've estimated a little differently than we have in the past, but food services, preschool revolving, we are estimating those that remain constant. It assumes a 3% increase in out-of-district tuitions. And I think that was pretty close to what we were finding. It might be a little bit high, but I think we were at 2 or 3% in most of our out-of-district tuitions that are known at this time, correct? Okay. It includes merit-based increases for our individual contract employees. Again, it accounts for all of our known FY22 out-of-district tuitions as of March 1st. I know we have a lot of conversations with Dr. Henrishon, with her support staff. There's a lot of communication when we have the potential of a student who may be leaving, or a student that she feels may no longer be able to be serviced in district, and to try to be able to recognize that has to be included in our budget. So to the best of our ability, we've projected anything that we feel could happen between now and the time that we still own that cost. And it also, as you know, as the committee voted on, it includes some of our FY22 personnel requests in our increases in FTE status as a result of personnel reorganization, as we presented that to you a meeting ago, and or budget changes. And I'll be more specific in the next couple of slides on that. What's still unknown? There are lots of unknowns for next year, and some of them obviously could have major costs. Obviously, the cost of any type of additional COVID-19 related supplies, PPE, that we may have in the upcoming year. Identification of costs that may occur for personnel and programs that are related to providing any additional academic supports. Again, you'll be getting a plan for us with ESA 2 monies, but I wanted to point out that those are all costs that are not factored into your FY22 budget. Actual costs, when we find out what programs and personnel we would need to address any of the social and emotional issues for students and staff. Training that we might need to offer or wish to offer for our staff, and any new special education out-of-district placements that occur, and particularly around any full remote students, because some additional services certainly, I believe, will occur and need to happen as a result, particularly of students who have been full remote, never been in school since a year ago, March. I will say that Dr. Henrishon and her team have been working with those students prior to this discussion to reach out to them to ensure that getting a list of students from the elementary principals to begin with, of those full remote students that may be coming back, so they can reach out to them prior to them coming back, particularly, again, if a student has not been here since last March. Next page. This is the list, as you know, that we presented to you in December of all of the additional needs requests, or what we call an educationally sound budget. I have put an asterisk next to those that were already included that the committee voted to approve, because we were able to incorporate those into your budget. Any of those that do not have an asterisk are those that are still outstanding unfunded positions, some of which we will come back to you in April at hopefully the first meeting with a plan to address. But I want to be very clear that we were able, as you know, the committee knows, to be able to incorporate any of the asterisk positions in next year's budget, and we have done that. So I think, again, through all of our reorganization and some budget adjustments, some retirements, unfilled positions, we're able to make this happen, and I think that it addresses a huge need for this district. Next page, however, is about $480,000 in unfunded budget requests. The technology integration specialists that have been on the budget back in December that were presented to you, the part-time clerical position at Chafee, the elementary reading specialist, the classroom teacher, and the foreign language teachers. I believe we can address at least 3 of these categories through ESA, our ESA 2 money. Again, the committee will get that presentation, but I think we can address some of these, short term anyway, through ESA money. Next slide is really a slide that will probably be more significant since you've lived this for a period of months, to our FinCom members to explain the need for these positions, but you certainly are well aware, as the principals and directors and assistant superintendent presented these positions and why these positions are extremely needed in this district. And then the next slide, which gets us to the money, We are requesting a level services budget per the school committee request. That cost is $18,775,975. That represents an increase of 3.24% over last year's budget figure. Last year's budget figure of $18,166,975 actually represented a 0.55% increase over FY20. And as the committee will remember, when we began this school year, we cut approximately $500,000. So we're really getting back to even, if you will. We're not looking at an increase that puts us anywhere but back to probably square one with this budget. If I were to, and prior to that, your increase over FY19 to FY20 was a 3.1% increase. So you've been averaging, other than the year where we, this past year where we gave back some monies to the town, you're looking at a 2.29% 3-year average increase. In any school department budget, the expectation generally is to provide a level services budget. It's a 4 to 5% increase yearly. So, 3% is not going to get you there generally without some changes. Usually it's, again, salaries where people retire and you're able to pull in younger people and their salaries obviously are lower. The town, as you know, has recommended to provide $609,000. Our actual request put us about $91,000 short of that, but we are able in this budget to work with that, I think, that figure, and make that adjustment and still be able to provide a level services budget. Next slide is the infamous pie chart that everybody loves to look at. So no surprise, we are a service industry. Generally speaking, 75 to 80% of your budget in any district is eaten up in salaries. Again, that's no surprise. The next highest cost factor is generally sped out of district tuitions. Again, that is our highest factor. 75.76 is salaries. 5.11% is sped out of district tuitions. And then the next two categories are your transportation. So those four areas constitute a little under 90% of your budget. So when we talk about where do we cut, and when we start looking at a budget, it is positions, because 75% of your budget is positions. So when those terrible years come to pass, you still need to put the lights on, you still need to heat your buildings, you still need to transport students, but unfortunately, you have to cut in areas around personnel. The next slide is just a 5-year budget history. It shows you the general appropriation that was voted for at all of the town meetings. This year's, of course, is requested. That's why it has an asterisk next to it. It shows you what Chapter 70 aid looked like. It has remained pretty consistent. There's not a lot of swing that you've seen. We anticipate that it's actually going to go down a little bit. These are estimated figures because we know that it has not been set in stone yet, but we'll have the governor's budget is out, the Senate and House one, of course, and that will give us a sense of where that figure will end up, but I don't anticipate it's going to be much different than what it's been in the past year. And then the town share, which does not include the indirect costs such as health insurance benefits and all of that they add in. And then our foundation enrollment. Now, one thing about foundation enrollment, it is not parallel to your actual enrollment. Foundation enrollment accounts for additional costs of providing special education services through an assumed rate or factor. It also includes students who are in your preschool half-day program. If you are kindergarten half-day, it includes your ELL students, it includes all your vocational students, so that's why that number looks different than your actual enrollment. Next slide. I wanted to make everyone aware again in public also of our capital projects requests. Those that are asterisked are the ones that we believe have support from the town side at this point. the foundation repairs at Barton and Chafee, the boiler replacement at OMS, the parking lot cracks at all schools, and the electronic door access at Barton and Chafee. I think some of you may be aware of the fact that we've had a recent issue with the siding repairs at Barton. A large piece of it fell to the ground. It truly reflects the state of all of that area in the buildings where they've used this, lack of a better word, I'm going to call it particle board. I know that they would probably call it cement stucco siding, but I don't think it's anywhere close to that. And while it is not on their radar screen on the town side, it is really an urgent issue, I believe. It is allowing seepage of water in. We know that the system initially did not call for that type of board, that the individual who came out and provided an overview of what was the problem, not only was it it was not in accordance with the initial specs that a change order came about, but also it was installed, in his opinion, incorrectly, in that the caulking should not have happened vertically, or should have happened vertically and not horizontally, and it was allowing seepage in. So it needs to all be replaced. There's no question, that's all of that white area around the entire building, the envelope, and then underneath, I think also in the, is it like the
Both
overhang?
elementary schools, you see it around the cafetorium, and you'll see it around the gymnasium, where there's no brick. All the areas that aren't brick, you'll see that, it's like a stucco, again, they call it cement board, but it's not.
There's a coating of stucco, thin particle over what appears to be, as Justin indicated, about a 1-inch board, and that's probably what they're calling their cement board. I don't know. I can tell you that whatever that stucco is paper thin. You can break it. That's going to be major, and I think that has to be on the radar screen of the town, and because I think it is going to be just get worse, and I think it's going to have to be addressed. Now, regardless, you're always going to need an elementary school. Even if 10 years from now you were going to close an elementary school, that building, I doubt, will never not be used as some type of a public building for schools. So you have to maintain. My point being, it's not like some of the old buildings that we've had where people have simply said, we're never going to use it, it's beyond repair, let's just tear it down. That is not going to happen with either one of the elementary schools. So you cannot leave them and say, well, we'll wait for 10 years. We'll see what the population looks like. Maybe we'll have to close an elementary school. I just don't think that that's wise to do. But anyway, next slide. Just a kind of a final summary and my thoughts about what has gone on. Certainly, as you know, last March, all of us in education recognized that it was turned upside down, and none of us could have predicted a year ago where we would be. I think through all of this, everyone has done what they needed to do. Certainly, initially from March to June, I think we were in a survival mode. But as we came back, I think our educators, all of our staff, from our teachers in the classroom to all of our professional support staff, our other support staff, our custodians, cafeteria workers, everybody has gone above and beyond what they needed to do to make it work for students. I would hate to see some of the great advances in many ways that we've had, to see us fall back into the pattern of the old traditional ways when we come back next year. And I hope that we've learned that we can do things differently, and some of it makes sense to continue. So I think it's exciting for whoever is coming in here, but for any educator to see what's next year going to look like. And I think there still is a story that is yet to be told in public education, because I do think we've changed it forever. And then, so finally, I'll end with a Socrates quote. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And I think that's really what we've had to do this year. And I think there are many things that we have built this year that we would want to continue to sustain in the upcoming years, because it is for the benefit of all students. So, any questions, I will gladly answer.
Thank you, Dr. Nash. I do want to thank Dr. Nash, Business Manager Justin Ledoux, and Town Manager Jen Callahan, along with the administrative team, and all the moving parts that put this budget of $18,775,975 together. I believe it's a very sound budget. Yes, we always have wishes, we have needs and we wants, and we balance that with the community. And I feel this budget is there. However, at this stage, I will open it up to the board and then to the general public. Board members, questions, comments? September, go ahead.
I think you all did a great job. Thank you so much. This is not an easy task. My only question and or concern, and that I've brought this up a couple of times when we've talked about the budget, is that we know that the learning gaps that have occurred or learning that didn't occur at all needs to be made up next year. And looking at the fourth grade incoming into OMS, my big concern is the lack of a reading specialist being provided there in our unfunded additional positions. We originally had talked about 2. I had brought up the fact of the third being really, really imperative, I feel. So I just would like to revisit that if possible. Even if we add it to the unfunded list, I think it's a goal that we need to really try hard to reach, because those fourth graders are coming up. So.
We hope that one way we can address it is when we look at the Title I to add another Title I teacher to the middle school. So that was another way of potentially, but we don't know what those figures are going to look like. Yeah, but I hear you.
Thank you. What else? Can I go?
Just a kind of a point of clarification, Dr. Nash. The second nurse at Barton, is that a contracted service, or is that being put into the operating budget of FTE at that building? Like, is that something that's paid? Like, we added the position essentially, right? Because I understand through the IEP the student needs the nurse, but is it through a contracted service, or are they an OEA employee?
They're an LPN, so they're not an OEA because they're not an RN, but it is in our budget. We don't contract with an outside agency to provide it. It's someone we have hired at a certain rate of pay.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So
think she's been
where
here
do they fall under? What?
If I may, they have an individual contract.
Yeah.
They service a sped student. It's a
Right,
one-to-one
no,
nurse.
believe me, I have one in my
They just have
building.
a one-to-one contract. They're not part of the collective bargaining.
So who negotiated the contract? And what does,
That
have we
was hired
seen?
under the former superintendent.
So have we seen that contract? I mean, I'm not saying we would need to see it necessarily, but
I don't know
Who
if she
did the
brought it to you
Okay.
when she hired them.
To my knowledge. no,
Probably
I'm
not.
Excuse me, let me just clarify. It's an appointment letter, similar to like a central office employee. So it's not a long-term contract. It's year to year.
Yeah.
right, okay, I just
Yeah.
didn't, I haven't, maybe I can't recall it, and I'm not sure how we go about doing year-to-year, service contracts like that. Maybe that's something I need to dig
So,
deeper
yeah.
into.
Anyone who has an individual contract, that would be, obviously anyone not in a union, either gets a multiple year contract, i.e. most of your administrators, or they get a year-to-year contract or year-to-year employment letter. So that would be all of your central office support staff, and in this case also the LPN at Barton School. I don't know who else is on an individual contract not represented by the union and not on a multiple year. So mostly it's central office support staff.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
totally understand
right.
that. I just usually you usually contract with a service. They come in, they
Yeah.
pay the service, but
I think it was
we're
cheaper.
identifying this person as an FTE at Barton.
Right,
So that's why it just was a little,
yeah. And it was
Confusing
cheaper,
to me.
probably, my guess is, than trying to go out and do it through contractual. I'm sure Sue probably looked at that avenue when that got identified in the IEP, that the individual needed a one-on-one, someone with medical, background and training.
You know what, again, it's labeled as a full FTE at
Yeah.
Barton, so I just
Yeah.
was curious as to what that is.
Yeah.
The second piece on the capital projects, so the ones with the asterisks, are those the ones that we put forward for recommendation to the town, or is that the ones that, are the town saying that's the one that they're gonna put forward for vote, or what are those asterisks be? I know it says recommended, but what does that mean, I guess is my question.
If I may, the school committee prioritized these projects. Please excuse me, I don't particularly remember the order. I believe it was foundation repairs, but it's irrelevant. So that we had a certain priority that this
that's
was
fine.
submitted, and all these items were submitted. At this point in time, this is what my understanding is being recommended going forward to town meeting.
So it may not represent the order in which you prioritize them.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, I'm not,
Right.
the prioritization for me as a school committee member is a moot point. It doesn't bother me. I guess if the siding repairs, I guess what's bothering me is if the siding repairs is something that sounds like it's really dire, it's not indicated there. So I guess my question is, are we looking to maybe, I know 25,000 for the electronic door accesses, that could wait. Parking lot crack fills, yeah, it's not ideal, I mean, that could wait. And then is there a way maybe to finagle through Easter too, maybe, I don't know, boiler replacement, could it fall as like air quality in building? Like, is there a way to get creative that we can have this 400,000 be a repair? Now, I'm assuming foundation trumps siding, right? We need to have the foundation solid, because that probably needs to stay. But I guess it's concerning to me that if this is a need, why is it not being reflected in this going forward for the town?
Well, this reflects what the town has prioritized. So we set forward this as being our list. In fact, you put it up there as a very high number, but the town has come back, looked at all of, this is my assumption and my limited discussion at this point. My assumption is that the town looked at all of the departments' capital list and looked at the amount of money they had and simply made some decisions based on the list of 8 that we gave, and simply said, we either do not have enough money to do all of this, so therefore we're going to pick and choose the ones that we are recommending. That doesn't mean that we can't continue to have at the FinCom presentation on Wednesday a discussion with them, because at that point in time, we didn't have a piece of siding that fell off. We didn't, this has been on your list for a number of years, as I understand it, and it probably is less than what it would cost now, because it probably needs to be updated. But it's my sense that they took this list and picked the items that they felt they could financially support at this time.
Right, I totally
Yeah.
understand that, so it's good to hear that we're still in discussions then as to what's going forward, because, yeah, I mean, obviously they're gonna go for the low item tickets, right? So to me, we need to maybe,
I think we need to emphasize
yeah,
that.
I think we need to emphasize siding repairs at Barton.
We
That
can certainly
needs to be-
discuss this
Yeah,
Wednesday night when we
Wednesday
have
night.
the meeting with
we have-
those folks.
You
Yeah.
guys have a meeting?
FinCom presentation is
Okay.
Wednesday night for budget, so I certainly intend to talk about that in a lot more detail, and to kind of look at the fact that maybe the game has changed a little bit with what's going on, at least in one school, and whether or not there's any way that the town can look at this. I don't know what response we'll get, but I certainly
Right.
want them to be aware of it.
It's an emergency and extraordinary repair at this stage.
Yeah, nothing set in stone. We can certainly.
Okay, yeah, that was one of my
Yeah.
questions. I
Look,
mean,
I know that,
I'm
yeah.
glad when Dr. Nash started saying that you guys are gonna be talking further.
Yeah.
And, well, I still have the floor. Third piece, I just wanna stress what Dr. Nash said to the people out there, and I'm not gonna say it as eloquently as she did, but basically this year's budget is getting us back to bare bones. I mean, let's be realistic, and I'm glad that she stated it. I know she didn't say it like that, but, it's getting us back to basically where we've been for a long time, and I know we'll be able to hopefully, get through it this year. But, we have some serious hills to climb moving forward too, and I just want people to understand that. I'm glad that you pointed that up, so thank you, Dr. Nash. Good, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Other board members? I'll open the floor. This is a public hearing. Please identify yourself. If there is an order to speak, if anyone cares to speak. Being none, I will close the floor. At this stage, I will entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 budget as part of tonight's public hearing, and to recommend from the school committee that a figure of $18,775,975 be voted and placed on the town's annual warrant.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Yeah, just making sure. All those in favor? Roll call vote. Mr. Cannacchioli?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well, 5 in the affirmative. And at this stage, I will close the public hearing. Next item on our agenda, I have minutes from March 8th, 2021, and intend a motion to approve the minutes of March 8th. All members were present and in person.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second that motion.
Moved and seconded, discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The record show, voice vote, 5 in the affirmative, and those minutes are passed. Okay. First business, school choice budget is fine. I'm going to hold the next item under the Student Opportunity Action Plan, as further information will be coming in.
We'll be putting it on the agenda for a vote at the April meeting.
Okay. Next, Mr. Burke, representing the Superintendent Selection Subcommittee. I hear you have good news for us tonight, sir.
I do, Mr. Chair. So we had a long but productive day Saturday with our screening committee. Mr. Cannacchioli and I would like to thank all the members of the screening committee. We had some great participation, some really good interviews. Very impressed with the candidates that came through. At this point, the committee has voted to put forth the following 4 finalists to be interviewed by the school committee. Bernard Audette, Mike Lucas, Dean Packard, and Frank Tiano.
Can you repeat those one more time, Mr. Burke?
Sure. Bernard Audette, Mike Lucas, Dean Packard, and Frank Tiano.
Thank you.
What is next up now?
Mr. Cannacchioli and myself will be meeting with the consultant this week to determine what the process will look like for the school committee's interviews.
Thank you. Do you have an anticipated date of interviews yet?
I believe it's on our.
Yeah, we have a range, I want to say it's,
I have to find it.
you know, sometime beginning of April, I think.
Beginning
is
of April,
that
okay. No,
range?
just curious.
Yeah.
No, I'm not holding out to a specific date. That's fine.
One thing that we can share is that Dr. Collins from NASDAQ will be sharing with the committee members after tonight's meeting the profiles of all 4 candidates, so that you can, you know, take a look at all the resumes and everything that got sent to us in the initial process.
Will we be privy to your notes or to the minutes from that session as
The
background
minutes?
information?
Yeah, the minutes, but all the notes, you know, were destroyed.
The notes were
after-
destroyed,
Yeah, after the.
but of the minutes of the interviews and,
The minutes, it will
the
they'll
minutes.
reflect the minutes, but there won't be any really details in the
Okay.
minutes of the interview itself.
all right. Thank you. Okay. Next piece is Mr. May, Kevin May, Athletic Director. Is he available tonight?
Yes, Mr. Coonan, I am here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. May, do you have an update of the Commander Maisley dedication?
Yes, I do. Thank you for having me this evening. So, over the last couple of weeks, I've been in touch with several vendors, securing quotes for a new scoreboard, which will be part of the Commander Maisley dedication. So I did, at the end of last week, secure the quotes from all the vendors and have forwarded them along to the central office and Justin Ledoux to take a look at and follow up with. I've also been in contact with Commander Maisley's brother quite a bit over the last several months, actually several years, on really what he's looking for and what's best for the family. So at this point, I do have those quotes, and all those quotes do have at least a rough artist rendition of what those scoreboards would look like. Once a decision is made on which vendor to go with, I'll be able to sit with Commander Maisley's brother to go through those and give him some say on how the verbiage is going to be on the scoreboard. Also, we are looking at, after talking to Joel Maisley last week, we feel that the opening football game this coming fall will be a great night to dedicate. So that's a time frame I'm looking at to hopefully sometime this summer to have the scoreboard up and ready and be able to dedicate it fully in the field, fully to Commander Maisley as we open our football season next fall.
Thank you, Mr. May. Any questions, Mr. May? No? Again, thank you for your hard work, everyone here at the high school, to the Maisley family, and I'm sure there's so many moving parts of trying to get something fitting for this great gentleman and scholar that worked in this building. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Ledoux, you're still in the hot seat. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coonan. As part of the committee's packet this evening, you should have received the budget to actual report through the end of February. I feel like a little bit of a broken record saying that, we have recognized some surpluses in some lines, notably athletics, due to, not really having much, transportation, substitutes due to not really being able to find many, and a little bit in utilities. We're still working to identify all those areas so we can, put that year-end money to good use. Just to bring the committee up to speed, a couple things I have been working on for the month of March. Part of our last discussion with how to utilize the surplus money at the end of this year, one of the items that came up was the English curriculum. So I've been working on moving the SPED psychologist that was unfilled this year, the OMS SPED teacher that has been unfilled this year, and a mid-year retiree at one of the elementary schools, repurposing those leftover monies, if you will, towards the 175 we estimate for English. I would like to put that aside, so as we get close to the end of the year, those monies are encumbered and ready to go for that English curriculum. I know that there's more to it, but I at least want to do my part and get the money set aside. Just an update on a couple things. I believe Mr. Coonan back in the fall had identified $14,000 for NEAS expenses at the high school. Well, now is going to be the time to use that for two reasons. The first being graduation. We've essentially paying for two graduations this year. We had one that occurred just after the new fiscal year, so we had used this year's budget to pay for that. Well, we have another one coming up in June. So I believe it's going to be double the cost. I think it's going to be $3,300 to have essentially a second graduation. It's odd to say that, but
In the same fiscal year.
yeah, and it's exactly two graduations in one fiscal year. So that's part of that 14,000. The other, I believe, Ms. Griffin, during our last conversation when we were talking about natural gas, I'd been working on the utility projections to the end of the year to see where we're going to land. Just to bring the committee up to speed, the electricity, we have not received all our bills yet. We're behind on our bills for electricity, so those are coming in now. So I'll have a better idea in the next couple of weeks of what that's going to be. However, natural gas, we've seen a large spike at the high school. The elementary school, I believe when last I spoke, I had worked through the elementary and middle school, and they seem to be right on par for where they need to be for natural gas usage. However, the high school, I believe the next day after we met, I found that it appears to be almost $10,000. It's going to be about $10,000 over budget this year. I did speak with the custodial staff to see if there's something going on with the gas meter or anything that I should be aware of. And they indicated back in the months of December, January, quite a few windows were open for obvious reasons, maybe a little bit too much. Since then, we've brought in additional resources to look at the HVAC system to show everybody, hey, everything is working where it should be. We have brought in air purifiers. We did get 150 of those back in December. Made those available if it makes staff feel more comfortable. So everything, from what we can do from our end to kind of dispel any misbeliefs of poor ventilation. I mean, that certainly is not the case. If anything, this is the most modern building that the school district has. It's the most, 2002, but still, compared to the other buildings, this is has the most recent HVAC system, if you will. But I did want to bring that to the committee's attention. It does look like I'm going to be about $10,000 over in natural gas. So when I say you had 14,000 for NEASC expenses, well, between the 33 for the graduation expenses and that, what I project to be natural gas overage. That's all I have for this evening.
Thank you. So at this stage, are the windows being shut now that the air purifiers are in?
They're cracked. So if a staff member like a crack a window, I mean, that should be sufficient. It's a little late now with the weather warming up, but yeah, it's not necessary even to crack the windows. We have 20% fresh air coming in to the building, and again, we brought in Fraser Engineering back in December to do a study on the building, the air exchange. We just brought in House Corporation to do another, just to take a look at the mechanics, and everything checks out. So
So the ones that are cracked, has a memo been sent out to please shut your windows at the end of the day?
I'm sorry.
Has a memo been sent out, the ones that are cracking windows, to please shut the windows at the end of the day?
I believe so. I'll have to check with Mr. Nugent, but I know the custodians at the end of the shift are making sure everything is
Everyone's on a shut.
everything's shut. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? No? Very good. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Nash, you have a report for us this evening.
I do. You have in your packet two pieces of information, both having to do with the phased-in return to school. The first packet is what was provided to us from the Commissioner on March 9th. It is a guidance on in-person learning and student learning time requirements. I would point out a couple of things in this that I think are important. First is that since last June, a year ago June, DESE has recommended that 3 feet is a safe distance for physical distancing. As you know, many school committees went above and beyond that, and most recently, this past week, I believe, CDC came out with guidelines about 3 feet for classrooms. In addition to that, back in January, pool testing became another mitigation strategy that was introduced. As you know, we are introducing pool testing. In fact, all of our faculty had a Q&A with our coordinator, our head nurse, Amy Granette, this evening at 5 o'clock. Elementary parents had an opportunity to jump in, and then we'll be doing another one. She will be doing another one for our secondary parents as we move forward. This initiative will begin on April 5th with those parents who have consented for their students, as well as with all of our staff, both our teaching staff as well as any other of our staff who work for us. We intend to do this throughout the end of this school year. There is a cost, as you know, that districts will be paying beginning in mid-April. That cost will be for the pool testing, not for the Abbott Barnex Now test. And we'll be using the governor's appropriation that we received for $85,000 as part of our ability to pay for that needs to be expended between now and June 30th. So as opposed to some of the Easter money, which we can carry over for a later date. I also would point out too, for those who might be listening, that in the fall there will be no requirement that districts provide remote learning, and that if you have a student who needs to be medically needs to have that discussion, that will have to be on a case-by-case basis. Again, there are lots of funding that has come our way, school districts' way. Recently, last week or this week now, I received from our association the estimated amount of money that the state of Massachusetts will be receiving, and it's called ARP ESER, or I call it ESER 3. So that we do not know what those allotments will look like. However, based on the information that the feds released to the states, it is going to be similar to ESER 2 in that it will be distributed 90% to LEAs with some holdback based on the Title I formula. So there is some estimate that we could see 2 to 3 times the amount that you received in ESER 2. Again, those monies right now need to be spent at and have an end date, a sunset, the same year as our ESER 2, which is 2023. So unfortunately, both ESER 2 money that you know of as far as the amount and ESER 3 sunset at the same time. thought hopefully there might be another year, so you could push it out, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Also, as you know, this information, through the amendments that the commissioner was allowed to make with respect to the law establishing his authority with respect to structured learning time, dictates that our elementary schools return on April 5th, and our middle school returns no later than April 28th. We have made the decision internally to return all our secondary schools on April 28th, even though the high school phased-in approach was going to give us 2 weeks' notice. In talking with the high school principal, it did not seem that it made sense to try to phase in high school students at probably what is the busiest time in high schools, May and June. So he agreed with that, and we are going to bring them back on the same date as our middle school. Other thing that I would point out, again, there are 2 exceptions this year for students in how they complete the rest of this year. Again, parents have received their surveys and they have an option to continue with remote learning this year. The other time when remote learning will count toward structured learning time will be when a student needs to be out for COVID-related illness, i.e. quarantine, isolation, because they've been identified as a close contact. So that will count. I don't want parents to think that because their child may choose to be full remote, they've heard something like that will not count. It will count. It will count for the rest of this school year. But it needs to be synchronous learning, and that's critical. A return to school for full-time in-person learning is 5 days a week, regular school day. That means a minimum of 5 hours at the elementary level and 5.5 hours at the secondary level. So those are discussions, as you know, we are having with the union as we redo the MOA, and I know that September and Dave will be meeting on Thursday with us. I need the school committee this evening to vote. One of the things that we needed to do was in talking with the principal at the middle school, because our configuration at the middle school includes 5th grade, and because his mandate is K-5 to return, the district needed to apply for a waiver. We would have had to apply for a waiver at the high school also, because grade 8 is at the high school, but because they're coming back at the same time as the middle school, we did not have to do that. So we were allowed to submit our waiver and then ask the school committee after the fact to vote because of the deadline, that deadline being today. We have already been approved for that waiver, so it really is, again, a vote for you to certify what we've already been approved to do as a result of the fact that there was really a rapid implementation that we needed to go through to make this work. So that would be the second piece of this that I have for you this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Nash. At this point, I entertain a motion to certify the waiver from Mass DESC that approves allowing grade 5 students to not be included in the elementary return to school date of April 5th, 2021, but rather as grade 5 is part of the Oxford Middle School to return with their grades 6 and 7 peers on April 28th, 2021.
Make that motion.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? Thank you.
I totally understand it's already been approved. Dr. Nash knows my opinion. I just want to let the public know that I feel that building 5, 6, 7 should be back, should have come back K-5. So when you hear my no vote, I just wanted people to understand why I vote no. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Roll call vote. Mr. Cannacoli.
No.
Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes.
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. The record show 4 in the affirmative, 1 against. Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Nash. Anything else this evening?
That is it.
Thank you. Mrs. Griffin, do you have a warrant report for us tonight?
I do have a warrant report for this evening, March 22nd, 2021. So there's 3 warrants that I signed. an accounts payable warrant dated March 16th, 2021 for $199,222.35. A payroll warrant dated March 18th for $579,206.40. And an accounts payable warrant dated March 23rd, 2021 for $95,464.57.
Can you sign those with due diligence? And you may continue. You have requests this evening.
I don't have anything really this evening. I just appreciate Mr. May's update in regards to the Commander Maisley dedication and him reaching out to the family and speaking to Joel Maisley in regards to that dedication happening in the fall. It's great to hear that all that research is happening behind the scenes and the scoreboard is underway as far as investigating what's best. And I'm just pleased to hear, those advancements. And it's also great to see all of our athletic teams kind of out there on the field and the kids practicing. They look very happy. It's nice to see that occur for our students. So that's all. Thank you.
Mrs. Forbes.
I share her sentiments for all of my appreciation, all the people who work on that budget, and I know it's so much more than just the central office staff, but I appreciate all of those. Mr. Conacchioli, Mr. Burke, and your committee, it looks like you're doing an exceptional job, and I really look forward to meeting the candidates you're bringing forward to us. I do have one request or question for the public. I was able to attend the Barton and Chafee parent Q&A, and there was a ton of question and concern about Educare. So I had made a note to please bring that forward. I'm sure Nick has heard all about that, so I just wanted to bring that forward publicly.
We are opening April 5th. Nick has sent surveys out. We will be running the before and after school programs. So we
Beautiful.
responded to their concerns.
Thank you so much.
Repeat the date again, please.
April 5th, elementary Educare begins, and the AM and PM.
That's
All right.
excellent.
Will there be a notice sent out? And
Oh, we've
posted?
already done that.
And posted on the website?
Yes, yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm. Yep.
Thank you for that, and that's it for me.
Thank you, Mrs. Forbes. Mr. Burke.
Nothing further, just thanking the screening committee for folks who volunteered all that time. They did a great job.
It's not easy.
Back over.
Yeah, similar to what Mr. Burke just said, Katie, Kim, Molly, Rob, Megan, Dave, Justin, Jessica, Corey, and Helen was part of us too. And Randy from NESDEC. It's really been it was a pleasure with this committee. I think we have 4 really strong people going forward and really excited for us to take the ball from there. So other than that, thanks to the budget, my colleagues have talked about that. I know that's a lot of work, so we really appreciate everything you've done. And that is it for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I'm just gonna pipe in real quick on that. Yes, I believe this, and I do trust there's 4 quality individuals here, and I look forward to really digging into resumes, making our own background checks, and digging a little, and really doing our due diligence before we interview in preparation for the next superintendent of schools. Thank you. All right, open the floor. Anything? Public comment? And I shall close the floor. We do have executive session, and we will be returning from executive session strictly for the business of adjournment. So at this stage, I would entertain a motion pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Paragraph 3. The committee will enter executive session to discuss strategy with respect to litigation in connection with the Zelensky labor claim, as is necessary to protect the litigating position of the public body, and the committee will adjourn and not return to open session. We have a motion to go into executive session. Do I have a second?
Second that motion.
Roll call vote. Mr. Conacchioli?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
And Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mr. Spooner votes yes as well, 5 in the affirmative. And our next meeting will be, our next regular meeting will be Monday, April 2nd. Any agendas, please get those, any agenda items, please forward to the chair or to the superintendent's office to be heard.
Did you say, excuse me, Mr. Chair, April 2nd? It did. I think April 2nd.
April
is a
12th.
Friday.
April
Only
12th.
because Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, April 12th, yes, April 12th.
I was thinking, I knew April 2nd was Good Friday, so.
Yes, April 12th. I apologize, April 12th.